In this episode of Collect or Reject,
Prince Robot definitely seems like a character name, at least, that a child would come up with. It'd be like, his name's gonna be Prince Robot, and his head's gonna be a TV.
Whether you a hero or a villain, expedition leads to crazy feelings. Every page I turn, you know I gotta feel it. New stories everywhere, busting out the comic strip. Story so good, it got me on a power trip. Crazy battles got my mind in a total race. Page 1, the original story takes place. So gear up for the new storyline. Writing so good it sends chills down your spine. Collect or reject, 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 collect or reject.
Greetings, true believers. Welcome to Collect or Reject, a show about comics, or more specifically, lesser-known comics. My name's Mark Withers, and I'm honored and privileged to be your host today. Here's how it works. Each week, a guest and I will read 5 issues of a pre-selected title, and based on those 5 issues, we'll try to determine whether or not that comic should be added to your pull list. Today's comic, Saga by Brian K. Vaughn and Fiona Staples. Joining me to talk about it is the host of the popular YouTube channel HMods, as well as an avid Twitch gamer and an all-around sci-fi nerd. Ladies and gentlemen, Hobbes Caltous. Hobbes, thanks for being on the show, man.
Not a problem, man. Great to be on this thing. I love working with you on stuff.
Likewise, man. Likewise. We go back some years, you and I, even back to...
It's got to be like 20 years at this point.
At least, I would say early to mid-aughts. Us both being in bands, me being in Desonic and you being in 9mm Solution and doing shows together. Those are some good times, man. So
it really was.
Yeah. So for me, this is going to be a special episode, man. It's good to talk, it's good to be able to bring in old friends and sort of talk comics. I know that back then you and I didn't really do a lot of nerd stuff together, but recently, we just joined forces and did like a series of TikTok videos for the Halo series back when I was in Nerd Cage Live. Yeah. And it's good to kind of bring you up. Yeah.
Let's just not talk about that.
I know. PTSD from that, right?
Pablo.
Hopefully this will be a more enjoyable ride for you. So for today's comic, I know that a lot of people are big fans of this one. Normally we do sort of more obscure stuff, but this is a personal favorite of mine. And so I wanted to sort of bring you in on it. I'm eager to jump in on it, but before we do, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So if you would, please give us a little bit of your background and how you got into comics.
Well, before I do that, first thing I wanted to say is like how similar our offices are, because you've got comics behind you, and you've got, the turntable and the guitar and all that stuff, versus I've got guitars and comics all over my office too. Like that's all comic book pages, and then all around my office is all comic book pages on the wall, and then certain comics and stuff. And I got my toys wrote over here. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, maybe that's why we get along so well, because it's like we have, aside from the video gaming stuff and the PC building, like you and I have a lot of the same interests. Like we both love metal, we both love comics and nerd culture in general. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that our offices are set up the same way.
Yeah. So to bring everybody into my world, I've been a nerd since probably the time when my father gave me my first Robert Heinlein book when I was like 5. Sci-fi has always been my thing. I've been less about magic and dragons and more about big giant lasers and walking tanks, which is literally the reason why I joined the military. Was I was reading Battletech books and Battletech comics as a kid. I've usually been more towards the superheroes that don't have powers, like Punisher and Batman and Iron Man and stuff like that. I've always been more about like the more realistic stuff. War Journal is one of my favorite titles.
Nice.
I've been reading comics since probably 7 years old. And when I started, it was stuff that we had to get like secondhand because we were like broke back in the day, which was a Wednesday. Yeah, big reader, always been a big sci-fi reader, big into comics, big into video games. As you said, I do Twitch streaming right now. I build gaming computers, things like that. It's just always been with me, even through the military. I took a Dr. Seuss book with me. It's a basic training that was not popular. My drill sergeants had a field day with that one.
Tell the audience a little bit about your YouTube channel, HMods. It's fascinating to me, how you're able to sort of, custom build these computers seemingly from scratch. And the way you personalize these things is awesome. Like the end result is awesome. So just tell our audience a little bit about that.
Well, the YouTube channel is about building fully customized computers, because gaming being, a multi-billion-dollar industry, it's one of those things where I was like, I'm versed in performing and being, somewhat entertaining, even if it's self-deprecating. I was like, well, I could do this, and I could do it, what other people aren't doing, which is putting production quality into actual modding. A lot of the tech tubers you have, like Jay's 2 Cents and, Linus Tech Tips and Nexus Mods, they'll build a computer, but they won't build a computer. It's all cookie cutter stuff. And I'm like, well, I built my computer and it looks badass. Let's develop a channel around it. And Cyber Gameway, helped a lot with that. But my big thing is building, the modified one-off stuff where nobody else has this. I might not have the most money in the world, but it's still going to look super cool. My wife is a big part of it because she is a big part of the creative team. She does all the camera work, and we bounce ideas off each other a lot. With the most recent project that we had, we basically took a 20-plus-year-old case. It's an old Gateway 2000 case, and brought that into the modern world. So it looks like a gaming computer case, completely redone, and it even has USB 3.0 on it now.
Nice.
So that's what we do. It's a fully custom shop that just happens to be entertaining.
Entertaining it is, man. And folks, I highly recommend that you all check this one out. But before you do, finish checking out this episode, because we're getting ready to talk about Saga. Now, this, as I said earlier in the episode, is probably one of my favorite modern comics. Whenever I try to explain it to people, I have a really hard time, because there's just so many
there's a lot there.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And so I'm going to let Wikipedia describe this for me. And it says, Saga depicts...
sure everything's accurate.
Right. I might have doctored it up here and there. So Saga depicts a husband and wife, Alana and Marco, from long-warring extraterrestrial races, fleeing authorities from both sides of a galactic war as they struggle to care for their daughter, Hazel, who is born in the middle of the series and who occasionally narrates the series as an unseen adult. This description itself is somewhat vague, but I can't think of a better way to kind of describe what's going on in it other than to just kind of break down the characters. But maybe you could do a better job, Hobbes. Like, what was your initial feeling when you first read this comic?
I immediately connected with Alana and Marco because I liked that it was sort of a Romeo and Juliet situation. Oh man, just how to just jump into a more detailed description without giving everything away. But it's just one of those things where you immediately connect with the main characters and, the peripheral characters. One of the characters is Robot 4, Prince Robot the Fourth.
Right.
And I was just like, what's his story? Because he's like Prince William, where he just feels completely underappreciated.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I really wanted to know more about him. I wanted to know more about Marco, and Alana and Marco met in prison. She was one of the people guarding and he was one of the prisoners.
Right.
And I want to know more about that. The first 5 issues, it really, really wets your whistle.
Right.
And I don't really know how more to describe it. All the characters in it, even the peripheral characters, they have dimension and depth. And I really, really dug that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This was my second time reading these 5 issues. Now the series itself came out in 2012. I had heard a lot of buzz around it around that time. And so maybe like the second half of 2012, beginning of 2013, I read it for the first time, at least these first few issues. And then most recently for this episode, I reread them. What I noticed more about the second reading is I remember an interview with Brian Vaughn where he talked about coming up with these characters from childhood. Like whenever he was bored, he would think about like, well, what if there was this Prince Robot character? Or what if there was this character? And what if they lived on this planet? And
it's interesting that you say that, because Prince Robot definitely seems like a character that a character name, at least, that a child would come up with. It'd be like, his name's going to be Prince Robot, and his head's going to be a TV. And every time he gets mad, you see this mad face on the TV. That makes a lot of sense now that you mention that.
Exactly.
Like, and the, one of the plants, cleave and wreath. And it just, those are words that a child would think are super cool words.
Exactly right.
It's really, really cool.
When I reread the series, coming back to that memories of that interview, I was like, no wonder this is laid out the way that it is. But it's executed in a way that doesn't feel childish. It just feels super imaginative.
It has the depth of something that had been thought about for a long time.
Right. At the same time, it touches on notes of adult themes. You know what I mean? Well, there's a lot of adult subject matter in it.
Yeah, there was some of that.
Some of the subtext having to do with war and like differences in culture and people having problems with like interracial or in this case, interspecies marriage. Yeah. Those are like very real world topics. And, I like that Vaughn touched on those things. Now, I don't know how much of that came out of his childhood, but but I like that it brings those things into this series without it feeling necessarily like preachy or like it's hitting you over the head with those things.
Right. It was like old heavy metal issues. Thinking about it now and having read some of those stories after decades of not having read it, after the first issue, I was like, wow, this is a lot like heavy metal. Not only for the overall feel of the story, but definitely some of the content.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a good assessment. I hadn't thought about that.
There's a naked spider lady in it, people.
There's a lot of naked people in it. Just fair warning. This is not something, if you're, I'm going to go ahead and say, if you're under 17, you probably shouldn't be reading this. But although if I was 15 years old, I probably would be reading it. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I snuck home issues of heavy metal when I was a kid. Some of that stuff was pretty good though, because that was the first time I'd ever heard of The Crow.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, James O'Barr first published a lot of the story in heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually got the first print of The Crow right over here on my shelf.
Oh man,
yeah, that's pretty nifty.
That's awesome. That is cool. Primal Warrior Draco Azul is the story of a man who finds a giant robot from ancient Mayan times and uses it to fight giant monsters that are mysteriously appearing all over modern-day Mexico. It's a little bit of Godzilla, Power Rangers, and Pacific Rim, all set against the Mexican backdrop for a unique cultural flair. Guys, I've been lucky enough to read the first few issues of this, and so far, I gotta say, I'm loving it. If you're a fan of mecha, kaiju, tokusatsu, or just really cool action comics in general, this is gonna be right up your alley. You can find Primal Warrior Draco Azul on Amazon Kindle and Comixology. Get yours today. Now, I thought we'd shift gears a little bit here and talk about the dollar value here. So at the time of its initial publishing in 2012, the cover price of each of these issues was about $2.99. Pretty reasonable, right? Mm-hmm. So fast forward about 10 years, the average cost of these issues is about $101.80, with the first two issues being quite a bit more than that. I've seen online. Yeah, I've seen them go as high as 500 for like a 9.6 or a 9.8 that's graded. But even ungraded, I'm seeing prices that are in the neighborhood of like 250 to 275, and then the other three being a little bit less than that. With that knowledge, does that sway your opinion one way or the other as to whether or not Saga is a collectible?
Oh no, it doesn't change it at all. I like the comic, but I think when it comes to a medium like this, I think comics overall are underappreciated. So when you find a good series like this, even an older one, I mean, we're not talking about a new contemporary title. We're talking about a title that needs to be read. Something like this. Oh yeah. I am constantly thinking about how things just are completely underappreciated. And like PC games, you can't get a PC game on hard copy to save your life these days. Yeah. But I think it's a medium that needs to come back. I think comics need to come back into the line, especially stuff that's not Marvel or DC.
Thank you. That, yeah.
Like, let's make a movie called The Darkness. That's a comic book story that needs to be told.
Yeah. My opinion on this, when we talk about comics that actually have a high dollar value today, a lot of times that'll sway someone, like where, if you had never heard of this comic before and maybe you wanted to grab it, if it was worth about $500 to get a first printing, maybe you wouldn't buy that because it may not appreciate any further than that.
For me, I've at least for a long time, until like the last 6 or 7 years, I was always of the opinion of, you look at Spider-Man #1. Spider-Man #1, if you can find it, and let alone if you can find it in a sealed frame, is an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
But I've never been like, wow, you know what? I really got to read it because it's Silver Age and it was crap back in the day. It was like, the comic book code ruined comics.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I was just like, I don't care.
Right.
But at this point in my life, if it's not a major company, I could possibly get into that. Like Preacher #1, I really want to read at some point.
Right.
There's a couple of like Marvel, DC, Top Cow, Image and stuff that I would love to read. But it's just one of those things where for the longest time, I was of the opinion that if it costs that much money, the market value is based on people that are controlling the market.
Right.
Versus something like Saga, if it's worth that much, I don't think it's worth enough.
Right.
Because it's like, it immediately hooked me. It was like The Expanse. It immediately hooked me. Because it didn't start with the beginning of the story. It started with a baby happening.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, so we're writing the thing. And I love stories like that. It was like Firefly.
Yeah. To me, the way that it's laid out, it's almost like, the way that a TV series might be laid out, like a modern show, where you're not starting at the very beginning of the story. You're like thrown right into the center, and then you're given that backstory sort of in bits and pieces as the story goes along. And I appreciated the way that they did that. And I like that they give the main voice to the baby. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, instead of it being the actual adult heroes of the series, Alana and Marco, the voice that kind of narrates the story is their infant child, which I thought was pretty innovative. Going back to the collecting part, I collect these as trade publications today. Like, I don't think I have a single issue, like an individual issue for this. But if I had the means to get the first 5 issues, in good condition and well graded, I probably would spend the money to do that, just because I think in 10 years time, 20 years time, they're going to appreciate even more, especially if this ever gets optioned to be an animated series, a TV series, a film, which it's like it's made for that. There's some things that probably wouldn't translate well, but the overall story, I think, is a sci-fi lover's wet dream.
I can totally see the stock being as badly done as The Rock's Scorpion King.
Oh no. Yeah, they definitely could not have released this in 2002.
Oh man.
Okay, Hobbes. Well, it's time for our official verdict here. So what say you, collect or reject?
Collect. Hands down.
Awesome. Same for me.
Get me issue #1. I don't care. Just, get me issue #1.
Absolutely.
In a frame.
Signed.
Signed. Otherwise, just give it to me. I'll smell it, put it in a bag, and put it away.
Same here. It's, you folks at home, you already know this is a collect for me, which is probably no surprise to anybody. Again, this is a well-respected series by Brian K. Vaughn and Fiona Staples. I don't know too many people that have read this and think that it's garbage. It's just under the radar. I wouldn't call this like a lesser known title like we have done in other episodes, but at the same time, it's not ubiquitous in the same way that like a Spider-Man comic would be, or like a Justice League comic.
Agreed.
There's a lot of people out there, a lot of casual readers that still have never heard of this series.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's kind of like The Walking Dead, where Kirkman didn't get near enough recognition for it, and then the show happened, and then
Right.
then
it
the
exploded.
number one's worth like $1,000 now.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
so this is definitely one of those.
Right. This is definitely something that should have gotten a lot more notice than it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Hobbes Caltous, for being here today. Hobbes, before you go, please tell our audience where they can find you.
On YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on builds. Most of them are HMods or HMods Gaming. Twitter is Hobbes Caltous. Oh, fuck. Now I have to bleep that out. So YouTube is HMods. Twitch is HMods. Instagram is, whatever. It's H-mods. There you go. I'm number one on Google.
Basically, yeah. So just Google or DuckDuckGo H-mods Hobbes. You will find Hobbes Caltous, and you'll find a fantastic channel. Of course, I want to thank you all for listening. If you like what you heard today, please rate and review this episode. Until next time, this is Mark Withers. Catch you on the next page.
Collect or Reject is a production of Press Play Media in association with Vaughn Sounds. This episode was produced and edited by Mark Withers, music by Keith Sewell. Saga was created by Brian K. Vaughn and Fiona Staples for Image Comics. For more information on this and other episodes, visit us at collectorreject.com.